All right. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another amazing Geek Vibes Nation interview. I am your content manager, Tia Fabi, and I have with me Dr. Kelsey Fuller-Shafer, who is here to talk about her upcoming book, Norse Mythology. Hi, Kelsey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tia. It's great to be here.
Awesome. If you don't mind me asking, where are you located right now? Are you on the East Coast, West Coast?
I am zooming in from Fairfield, Connecticut. So I work as a university librarian at Fairfield University. So East
Nice.
Coast.
How have you been enjoying the weather lately? Because I feel like 1 minute it's sunny, 1 minute it's rainy, and I'm not kind of feeling it today.
Yeah, it was sunny since noon, and then as soon as I went to leave the library today to get out of work, it started downpouring. So, you know, it's been a week.
It's
Whatever. It's only Wednesday.
and it's been a week. Well, I am really excited for you to be here. I was saying before I started recording that I was really excited when I got the email to interview you because your book, Norse Mythology, is coming up. I feel like, and obviously there's a difference between real Norse mythology and things like the Marvel universe and stuff, but I almost feel like from the Marvel universe and then other things like Neil Gaiman has written some stuff on Norse mythology that there's kind of an interest in Norse mythology. So I want to ask what started your interest in researching this?
That is a great question. I first became aware of Norse mythology, I think probably in like early high school because of my love of J.R.R. Tolkien, actually. So I loved Tolkien all through high school, and then when I was in college, I started studying music. If you kind of dive the corners of the internet, you'll find out my degrees are all actually in music and musicology, and ethnomusicology is what my PhD is in. But I started doing studies in Scandinavian music, and that was indigenous Sami music. It was Swedish folk music. It was basically everything Scandinavian. I dabbled in a little, and when universities right now, they're all struggling for funding. Professors are all fighting for jobs. There's, too many people graduating and not enough jobs for everybody. And so everybody's being asked to work outside their area of specialty. And because I could read Swedish, they were like, great, can you TA these classes on Norse myth? Or can you TA these classes on Viking era history? And I was like, no, but sure. And so then you kind of just like, it's that magnetism of like, the Vikings and the Norse myth, like you kind of just get roped into it. And once you're in it, you never really leave because it is so popular. Once you're in it, nobody lets you leave. Um, and and not to take anything away from, the comic book reimaginings and all that kind of thing, because it's literature, and why not draw inspiration from it and do fun things with it and make it more palatable or relatable for 21st century audiences. I have spent a lot of time working with the sources that are 1,000 years old, but I've also gone and seen, I think, most of the Thor movies too. So, it's whatever floats your boat. But that's kind of the short version of how I ended up getting into Norse mythology.
And I believe that you have even spent time overseas. It seemed like maybe several years. Is that correct?
I have spent time overseas, not for several years, like together.
Okay.
I've gone to Sweden several times over the years. When I was working on my dissertation, especially, I was going to a northern town called Umeå in Sweden to work with a few Sami artists on my dissertation, which was about popular music and kind of the political and social commentaries that we're seeing in popular music, with regards to things like indigenous rights and ecofeminism and that sort of thing. So kind of very different from Norse myth, but
Right. With your book that's coming out, can you tell those who are watching us, like, what approach do you take in your writing when it comes to this? Is this very much just a history sort of thing, or what do you really touch upon in the book that people can kind of look forward to?
Well, actually, I've got a copy here I can show you. I got my advanced copy. Yay. So I'll just start by saying this is part of a series. So Simon and Schuster said, would you write the Norse myth book in this series? There's one on Greek myth that's already out. There's one that's kind of a global, international, just called Women of Myth, and different women. So they actually set the format of it. And what it is basically a character encyclopedia. Mm. So I start out with kind of an introductory chapter of what is Norse myth? Who were Vikings? Where are the primary sources? So if you don't believe me, like where can you go to check all this information? Right. And then kind of like the creation myth, and then Ragnarok, the destruction myth, to kind of be the bookends. Mm-hmm. And then inside, like the second and the fourth through the fourth parts. So like part 2 is all of the Aesir and the Vanir, like the main gods and goddesses, names that we recognize, like Odin and Thor and Freya. Part 3 is all the antagonists. So then we get Loki and like the Midgard serpent and all of those Jotun villains that antagonize the Aesir. And then part 4 is the human heroes. So if anybody's familiar with like the legend of Sigurd, Gudrun, and the saga of the Volsungs, those heroes, and then, you know, a few others. So my approach to writing was kind of like, all right, so I've got like a paragraph. They limited me to like 800 or 1,000 words per character. Oh, wow. And for some of them, it was like, oh, I have to say 800 words about this. And some I was like, oh my gosh, I could say 3,000 words about this. Right. Just because it's like so unbalanced with how much material you have about each one. But I basically picked one story from the primary sources and said, okay, that's the story we're going to tell about this particular character. And so what's the most important thing that somebody should know about them? And I kind of approached it like me also being like a proud geek. I mean, I chose to work in a library with alongside other proud geeks. That's who we are. I kind of thought about it from like the audience of like somebody who learned about Thor from comic books or from movies or something like that. And like, what would they be interested to know about the original primary sources? What's exciting about this character? And sometimes what's different, what doesn't line up. Just so they can have that historical context to kind of appreciate where these ideas came from, and then like the game of telephone that we've played over 1,000 years to get where we are now, where we see Thor and we think Chris Hemsworth.
It is very true. Yeah, I remember when the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe first started, and we had Thor, and I was like, "Ooh, cool! Thor and Loki, brothers," and yada yada. And then learning actual Thor, like Norse mythology, and going, "Oh, this isn't anything like how I thought it was going to be." So, I feel that a lot of people will probably be in my position when they're reading your upcoming book, which I have to say, I am still waiting for it to come in the mail. So I wanted to have it here. So I'm glad that you were able to show it at least.
Yep. They don't start shipping until I think October 3rd. So hopefully shortly thereafter. But yeah, I think there's 2 ways we can look at it, right? We can be disappointed that it's not the comic book version, that sometimes the stories are not quite so exciting. You know, there's not the plot twist that Loki is Thor's secret half-brother or anything like that. Or we can kind of just appreciate them as 2 separate documents of like, these are the primary sources, these are what those say. And then look at all of these really creative things that, you know, Stanley and others have done with just this idea that's so very old.
Would you, when you were writing the novel, and as you said, there's some characters that you could write 3,000 words for, is there a specific character in Norse mythology that you find yourself really fascinated with?
Yes. I'm actually going to go with Baldur.
Ah, okay. That is, if I'm not mistaken, Thor's brother, correct?
Yes. Okay. The only difference between Thor and Baldur in that respect is that Baldur was born in wedlock and Thor was born out of wedlock, because Odin cheated on his wife many, many times.
Which seems like such a thing of men in mythology. Same thing with Greek
I know, such a
mythology.
Zeus thing, right? Such a Zeus thing.
So what draws you specifically to Baldur that you just really are fascinated by him?
That the most important thing he does is die. When you think about gods, I think particularly in a culture that's so saturated by Judeo-Christian ideas about what God is, we tend to think about gods as being omnipotent, and we tend to think about them being moral authorities, and that's not how the Norse people viewed their gods, right? Most of the gods are going to die at Ragnarok and not be reborn. And the cool thing about Baldur is that he's like everybody's favorite. He's Odin's favorite son. He's, Frigg, his mother, goes around to every living thing and makes them swear an oath never to hurt Baldur, except for this one tiny mistletoe plant that she thinks is too innocuous or too young to swear an oath. And so then Loki, of course, our antagonist, tricks Hoth, who is Baldur's brother, into basically throwing this mistletoe plant at him, and somehow that kills him. And it's not, people are always like, how do you kill somebody with a mistletoe plant? I don't know.
It's mythology. It happens.
And Baldur's death sets off this chain of events at Ragnarok. And so he's this doomed figure in some of the poems. Like he's troubled by dreams of death. He knows he's going to die, and yet, him and Odin, they keep tripping over themselves. And like, because it's a society that believes so deeply in fate over free will, there is nothing that anyone can do to prevent Baldur's death. So every arrogant mistake that he's doomed to make, and it's just going to happen. And there's something so fatalist about that character, and the fact that everybody loves him so much and that he's going to die. And they all know he's going to die, and they just keep doing the things anyway. It's such a fascinating construct and a concept to me that I think, now in the 21st century, we all like to believe that we have some free will. And Baldur's kind of the character who makes us think, well, what if you don't?
Right.
Just a completely different way of looking at the universe and humanity and all of those things.
That you touch upon in the book, right?
Yes, I do. Yep, I tell Baldur's story. And I also relate him to Boromir. If there are any Lord of the Rings fans out there, he's, a favorite son. The brother gets punished, even though it's not his fault that the older brother has died. They both have very boat-centric funerals. They're both kind of doomed by this arrogant mistake. They both have these dreams and premonitions. Peter Jackson left that out of the movie, but in the Lord of the Rings books, Tolkien has written this dream riddle in that kind of plagues Boromir. So I think Boromir is very much like a Norse hero kind of wrapped in with this Baldur fate.
How does it feel to have a book that's coming out? Like, I feel for myself, I sit there and go, wow, that'd be really cool. I'd probably be telling everyone. Have you, do you tell your family, your friends? Are you like, hey, you got to get this, you better buy it?
Yes. So I have Simon & Schuster has assigned me a publicity manager, and it's a really good thing I have this person because I'm very bad at self-promotion. I'm kind of just like, well, I don't know if anybody's going to like it, but I have this book. But yes, no, I've been, posting on social media. I'm not a big social media person because I'm kind of old and out of touch, if I'm being honest. But it's kind of exciting. It was really an exciting day when I got it in the mail in an envelope. They didn't really tell me when they were shipping it, so it just showed up, and I was like, oh, that's my copy sitting there. Okay. One of my favorite things about it also is seeing the artwork in it. We have an illustrator named Sarah Richard, who is just phenomenal. So she designed the cover that I showed you, but just show you like what do you want to see? Well, there's Baldur that I was just talking about.
Oh, I love
And
that
she's got
artwork.
like his boat there and the little mistletoe plants. Like she didn't miss anything when they gave her some of the stories. Like there's Odin with his ravens and his spear and all that. And she was also really great about because I'm a nerd and a scholar and an instructor at some time, so it's like I have to be like a stickler for historical accuracy sometimes. And so she was really good when I said, look, the horned helmets, we can't have the horned helmets. Like I know everybody recognizes the horned helmets, but that's an invention of like opera culture and that sort of thing, so could we not have those? And she just did these like amazing great and historically accurate images for the book. So I'm as excited as I am to like have a book with my name on it. I'm even more excited to have a book with her art in it too, because she just did such a phenomenal job.
No, it looks beautiful. Like I sit there and go, I can't wait for my copy to come. I think the cool thing about Norse mythology is just how ingrained it is in everyday culture. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, the days of the week are inspired by that, correct?
Yes, several of them. So I'll just point out that like I have these little now blurbs throughout the book, and they're like, if you could just put like nerdy little facts in, like a few of them throughout. And it's like, so yeah, thank Frigg is Friday is one of the things that yeah, because Fredag is Frigg's day, Torsdag, Thursday is Thor's day. Wednesday is a little hard, but it's from the original Germanic Woltensdag, which is Odin's day. So yep.
They're I don't know, have you read American Gods by Neil Gaiman?
I have not. It's been recommended to me many times. It's on my list. I will get to it.
There's a character in it called Mr. Wednesday. And it's because in the book, like all the characters are gods from different mythologies. And he is Mr. Wednesday because he's Odin. And he starts off the book and show by saying, oh, today's my day. So little things like that, I guess, were how I found out more about Norse mythology's influence on modern day culture. And I think that that's really cool. And I kind of wanted to use that to transition into a conversation that we were having prior to recording, because you had said to me that the reason why you want, say, the PhD in your name is so that people know that you are, expert, authorized to talk about this, unlike some people who aren't authorized to talk about it, who unfortunately have woven Norse mythology in the wrong way into their culture. So I don't know if you want to like pick that up and speak about it or anything.
Yeah, sure. So the reason that I like to be really clear about like, the fact that I approach this from an academic standpoint and, I work with scholars and translators that I trust is because a lot of Norse mythology has suffered for a very long time from kind of like an armchair anthropology, and also with that, these veins of white supremacy. And I'm certainly not accusing everybody who's into Norse mythology of being into white supremacy, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like, we could trace it all the way back to Wagner using kind of these stories and these characters between the Scandinavian and the Germanic versions of them to kind of elevate and justify the greatness of whiteness and of representatives of the white race. And Hitler picked up on Wagner, and then it kind of just gets murky from there. And it's really unfortunate. Tolkien, my guy Tolkien, he wrote a letter to his son Michael that's often referenced, where he expresses just how angry he is at Hitler for taking these Norse sources that he loves so much and kind of coloring them with these really hateful and kind of racialized ideas. But I think when you study it from an academic perspective, when you just kind of look at it and say, okay, these are the myths, this is where people got their values from and where people think they came from, then it's kind of like it's just like that white supremacist context. You can just shove it in the corner and completely ignore it. And so that's one of the things that I'm like really careful about. Like I think we need to shove it in the corner and not even give it voice. Which is why I didn't even mention Wagner in the book, because there's not enough space, and it's something that's supposed to be a character encyclopedia. There's not enough space to unpack that whole history and all, and like just shove it in the corner. We'll deal with that when it becomes a problem. But yeah, I mean, I think when we go back to the primary sources, we can see where people like Neil Gaiman, people like, Tolkien or Stanley or anybody who's tried to revitalize some of these very old sources, where they draw these inspirations just from the peculiarity of the stories themselves and of the mystery of the characters. And I think that's enough. I like to throw in some political context from, like, in the Viking era, the social values were this or were that, or things like that. But just the stories themselves, they are enough for me.
The characters in Norse mythology and other mythology, I want to say that growing up, I was very into Egyptian mythology and learning about the characters in that mythology, Greek, Roman. It's just all very interesting how you can have so many books, so many stories about these, characters, that it's almost endless, and it feels like you can just never learn enough. Do you feel like that, where even you yourself are still learning about different sections of Norse mythology?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the hero sagas, the human heroes, that's kind of where it gets endless. I don't want to say we're lucky, because that sounds like a cop-out, but like the stuff about the gods, like the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, that's pretty finite. It's kind of just like, a few books, and that's what we got. That's what we got to work with. That's what survived all these years. So it's not endless heaps and piles. There are endless heaps and piles, I feel like, of some of the hero sagas, and the sagas of the Icelanders, which are not technically considered mythology. They're supposed to be real history, but I think there's a little family flair, dramatic embellishment happening there.
Some folklore happening or
yeah,
something.
They describe like, and then he encountered this ghost, and this ghost did this, and they're all technically real people, real family names, but embellished to make a better story. But I think where we can have like the most fun with the finite sources that we have is trying to decode some of the meaning of the poetry, right? Because the Poetic Edda was originally written in verse, and they use these little these poetic devices called kennings that are like little substitutions, because the Poetic Edda was written with a specific meter and an alliteration pattern. Like in English, we tend to think about our poetry rhyming. And I think this is still true of German poetry today, but in, the year 1200 in Iceland, they were more concerned with alliteration, where like all the lines have this pattern where the first line in a couplet starts with one letter, you get that in the middle of the second line in the couplet. So this kind of zigzaggy pattern where the front of the poem, the beginning of all the lines, have this kind of pattern of alliteration. And sometimes you would need to substitute words to make that happen. And so it's like this little riddle that's this poetic device that's, you might substitute a name, or you might add an adjective just to make it work. Like if you have the word ocean, for example, that's what you're trying to convey, but you need it to start with a consonant like a W. You might call it a whale road.
That's interesting.
And it makes sense, but when you just look at like a plain translation of it, it can be kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so different translators will do different things, and that's how we've ended up with these vastly different translations of, you know, these same documents. And I think that's cool. I think different translations are cool. I'm not a purist who's like, no, there is one right way and we must translate it till we find the one right way. I'm kind of like, yeah, let's see how different people who speak this language, you know, find themselves interpreting and falling within this text. So yeah, there's plenty of room for exploration still.
Well, I was going to say, are you, so this book, Norse Mythology, comes out October 3rd. You said that they were starting to ship them out, and I believe that's what the email said, is October 3rd. Are you planning on writing more, or is this kind of where it's at? What's going on there?
Well, I have another manuscript in the works.
Nice.
I'm looking for a publisher for it. It's probably going to be a little more academic in that one of the rules of the Norse mythology book was that they couldn't really do like academic style citations. Which when you've got a set sort of primary sources, you can just kind of say, these are the translators I'm using these books. And then it's easy enough for somebody to find it without doing like an MLA style citation or an APA style citation. But the next manuscript I'm really hoping is going to be a Tolkien and Norse myth book. And that one really requires kind of a more heavy citation style to link to all of the other scholars that I'm drawing from and all of these hard to find documents and, like, you know, the letters of J.R. Tolkien, which is just this huge behemoth of a book. So I'm hoping to, I'm hoping to keep publishing. I'm hoping to kind of expand. I don't know if I'm going to be strictly in Norse myth forever. I would love to get back to Sami music. The Sami being the indigenous people of Scandinavia. They're doing a lot of really interesting political and eco-critical music that I would love to get back to at some point. But the pandemic kind of crushed the field work for a while. So Norse myth is easy because that's freely accessible and you can kind of do a lot of that everywhere. So I might kind of go back and forth. I like to kind of just dabble in a little bit of everything.
Which is always good. Keep it, you know, a variety. And you said this before, I mean, you work full time. Where do you get the time to also work on these manuscripts?
Well, I will say Simon and Schuster approached me before I got my current full-time job. So I had just finished teaching a year at Augustana College in the Midwest in Rock Island, Illinois. And for some family reasons, I was like, I don't know if I can move because my family's all in Connecticut and Massachusetts. It's like, I don't know if I can really move back and spend a year away from my family again. And then they approached me with this book and I'm like, well, all right, I'll do this for a while and then see where that takes me. So I basically wrote this book in 4 months. They gave me 4 months to write it. Which nice. I could not have done. I could not have done that with a full-time job. But I will say, you know, that's better than some academic publishers who, like, you send your stuff and it's like, we'll get back to you next year.
Oh, that is true. That is true.
You know, everybody in academia is, you know, teaching or doing their own research. So publication just kind of happens really slowly. But yeah, no, they gave me 4 months to write it. And then I sent in the manuscript and started my job at Fairfield. Like, I sent it in on a Friday and I started my job at Fairfield on a Monday. Oh,
wow.
So the moral of the story is no human mortal should ever plan on writing a book in 4 months when writing a full-time job, because it is a full-time job. Well, and it just, the stars just aligned for me to get away with it. So
I couldn't imagine on top of what I do for Geek Vibes Nation. I also work full time, and then during the pandemic, I was doing some freelance writing, and even that, where, hey, tomorrow I need you to write an article of 1,000 or 2,000 words, and it's like, how do I do this? So
it's a delicate balance. But when you really love it, you find the time for it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you'll definitely negate some sleep to get that stuff done. For anyone who's watching, who will watch this video, who that they themselves want to publish a book, they're working on a manuscript. I mean, everyone's unique, but what steps do you think that they would take to get a publisher or something? I mean, how was your journey when it comes to that? Or you said they approached you, so, but now you're in the process of also looking for a publisher for your new manuscript.
Yes, I did get off easy because they approached me for the first one, so I didn't have it ready and say, "Hey, will you publish this?"
Yeah.
They kind of said, "Hey, will you write this?" And I said yes. But where I'm at with this new manuscript is like looking at other, well, like we all have the books that we like to read and the authors we like to emulate. So start looking at the copyright information and see if there's a common thread. Like, hey, this publisher or this, this group of publishers, because they were like, the conglomerates that have all the sub things again, they seem to publish a lot of, X, Y, and Z. And so if you start seeing those common threads, that's honestly a good place to start. You can also, I mean, literary agents. I've never written fiction, but I know that there's so many people out there trying to publish fiction. So if you have an agent, they really know that market and they kind of know how to save you the time and figure out, what is best. I've had a friend of mine actually, Lisa Brunell, wrote this amazing historical fiction work called Gallows Road that's based on all of this archival research that she did about an execution that took place in Connecticut, and she kind of fictionalized it and twisted the ending, and she's been kind of my hero because she was doing all of this, and she was talking to everybody who would listen and going to all of the book talks and making all of the friends. I'm like, okay, that's what Lisa did, so that's what I have to do. So trying to find somebody who's done it before, and can kind of like show you the people in your area who are supportive, whether it's a local bookshop or a library where they're going to let you talk or something like that. That's always good too. Just kind of, and those connections can also happen online, right? There's so many interest groups on, the Reddits and the Instagrams of the world.
Yeah, we are we are in the online era, so I guess like utilize that if you can.
Yeah, find friends who are willing to share their wisdom and help you kind of forge your path, and sometimes go to bat for you, right? Drop your name and that sort of thing. That's how I've been doing it so far.
That's awesome. Well, Norse Mythology comes out again October 3rd. As I do with all my interviews now, I know you said that you're not really on social media, but where can people find you if they are looking for you?
Probably at my desk. My social media are all private, but I'm Kelsey.a.fuller.shafer on Instagram. I should probably make that public because, like I said, I'm bad at self-promotion, but
you want to promote this book, and we're going to be having this on our YouTube page promoting it.
That's right. So I'll tell them Tia sent you, and I'll let you be my friend on Instagram.
I like that, Kelsey. I like that. I look forward to getting my copy of Norse Mythology. I certainly will read it and put a review out on our website once I get it. I hope that the sales and everything are very successful with that, because I just like the idea of people learning more about, the different types of mythology. And good luck with your new manuscript as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so again, thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, everyone who will watch this video. Please make sure that you like and subscribe. Of course, got to do that. And once you get a copy of Norse Mythology, which I will put the link down below, please let me know what you think about it. And I hope once you get everything with your next manuscript, if you want to come back and do some promotion for that as well, we'd love to have you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. It was so nice talking with you.
Nice talking to you too. Bye, Kelsey.